Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this evening's presentation. Nah, I'm just kidding, guys. Hello, my name is Tom, and you know me as the Dawnbreaker. After the last video, I actually decided I would like to give it a shot reading a story live on camera, and I'm gonna upload it, and I hope it's gonna go well, or I'm just wondering how you guys gonna react to it. That's the main thing that I wanna see. The story I've chose for tonight is Painted Prison by Nessieinternational. So here goes. Painted Prison. Hope and near silent pleas were all she had left. But today, like every day before, neither would be enough. One soul had long since surrendered, silently accepting their eternal confinement. The other clung fiercely to the fading embers of belief. Over the loudspeakers of the Art Institute of Chicago, a polite automated voice announced that the museum would be closing in 10 minutes. The last visitor in Gallery 263, a young woman, hurried towards the exit. She left with a lingering chill, deeply unsettled by the painted eyes of the picture of Dorian Gray watching her depart. A brittle scent hung in the heavy air-conditioned atmosphere, the sharp chemical odor of old paint and aging varnish settling over the room. Silence returned to the gallery, but only for a moment. The sharp, clattering click of high heels broke the quiet, soon accompanied by the rapid scuff of sneakers and the rhythmic squeak of a wheelchair. A museum curator stepped into the room, heading toward the center where Grant Wood's masterpiece, American Gothic, was displayed on a temporary gray partition. The frozen, bespectacled eyes of the Midwestern farmer stared past her, his hand gripping a pitchfork. Beside him, his daughter's gaze remained locked forward, trapped in their iconic, severe pose before the white, Carpenter Gothic house. Following close behind the curator were two 19-year-old Chinese-American tourists from San Francisco. One, wearing a gray UC Berkeley hoodie, pushed his best friend in a wheelchair. "Okay, we close in 5 minutes, so let's make it snappy," the curator said with a warm, cheerful smile, taking an iPad from the teen in the chair. "I don't usually let visitors linger past the announcement, but you two have been incredibly sweet." Two teens smiled brightly for the camera lens as they posed beside the painting. The student in the Berkeley hoodie held a long, black umbrella aloft, mimicking the farmer's pitchfork, while his friend in the wheelchair perfectly recreated the sharp, sour glare of the daughter. A sharp camera click echoed through the gallery, and the curator handed the iPad back. Thrilled with the captured holiday memory, the teen in the wheelchair turned his head to steal one final glance at the beloved masterpiece. That was when he noticed it. A single bead of moisture slid down the painted cheek of the farmer's daughter, then another, and another. When he pointed out to the curator, she answered with a casual, practiced cheer. "Oh, it's just condensation. It happens sometimes when the temperature variance between the canvas and the gallery air fluctuates too much." Those words struck the invisible trapped presence within the room like a physical blow. The truth was far from simple. The curator was a reputable expert in her field, but no amount of modern art history could uncover the dark reality of the canvas. Only the souls imprisoned within the paint knew the truth. As Grant Wood's grandmother stared out from behind the painted eyes of the daughter, watching the trio prepare to leave, her mind drifted back across the decades. She remembered the late 19th century and the long, bitter chain of events that had ultimately woven the magic spell locking her away. It had all begun during the Gilded Age of 1890s, an era of rapid, soot-choked industrialization. Amid a changing world, her grandson, Grant Wood, was born in 1891, a monumental event for his parents who eked out a harsh living as humble farmers. When her son sent a letter announcing the birth, the grandmother traveled to meet the infant. A rare flicker of warmth had crossed her heart upon seeing him, and she had remarked that his birth was the start of an amazing chapter. But every chapter, no matter how promising, carries a darkness no one can control. The cruelty beneath her compliments exposed itself almost immediately. She followed her praise with a sharp, biting speech, declaring it an uneducated mistake for the couple to bring a child into the world when they were so financially unprepared. Her cruel certainty that her grandchildren would grow up to be nothing but troublemakers and societal leeches triggered a harsh reaction in Grant's father. He adopted a rigid, suffocating parenting style, keeping a severe eye on his children, forcing every choice through his own lens of strict judgment. That visit was the first domino to fall, setting in motion the path that led to her painted prison. As Grant grew older, his resentment for his paternal grandmother hardened into pure hatred. He had questioned his father about the crushing control exerted over the household, and learned the truth of what the old woman said during her infamous visit. That hatred compounded into horror when he uncovered his grandparents' history in Virginia. In their youth, they had been wealthy slaveholders with deeply elitist worldviews. They judged the worth of human life entirely on skin color and social status. Anyone who failed to meet the rigid standards of beauty and perfection, African Americans, the poor, the uneducated, or the plain, faced humiliating mistreatment. That cruelty had extended directly to Grant's own parents. The grandmother's bleak predictions were shattered when, at the age of 14, Grant won first prize in prestigious New York drawing competition. His widowed mother was bursting with pride, reassuring him that his late father would have finally changed his mind and welcomed the achievement. When alive, his father had aggressively disapproved of artistic pursuits, viewing them as a low-paying, unsuccessful waste of time. By the time of Grant's success, his grandmother had already passed away. Though his mother never spoke of it aloud, Grant knew she secretly wished she could stand before the old woman's grave and prove just how wrong her hurtful words had been. Grant might have dismissed his grandparents as mere products of a harsher time, if not for a chilling story his mother later shared. In 1872, a 6-year-old newspaper boy had been brutally beaten by Grant's grandfather with a heavy walking cane, leaving the child with permanent brain damage and missing teeth. According to a historical archive in the Hawkeye newspaper, the boy's only crime had been asking for an extra dime from the hard-working, wealthy folk, despite being deemed uneducated and ugly. The local police did nothing. The grandparents' vast wealth and political influence shielded them from any consequences. The story burned itself into Grant's memory. What horrified him most was learning that his grandmother had openly defended the attack, claiming such a beating drove home the importance of parental responsibility. Blinded by a volatile mix of shame, grief, and fury, Grant swore an oath to inflict a terrible, eternal punishment on his grandparents, a vengeance they had successfully evaded in life. For years he searched. He dabbled in Appalachian folk magic, but none of the old remedies possessed the cruel permanence he desired. That changed when he heard whispers of a forbidden craft being practiced in secret at a highly respected institution. In 1913, Grant enrolled at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago. There, he sought out a professor rumored to be a master of the dark arts, a man whose magic made paintings and sculptures look unnaturally lifelike. Such masterpieces, Grant discovered, were achieved only by binding the souls of the deceased directly into the artwork. Recognizing this as an ultimate retribution, Grant practiced the craft obsessively until he mastered the complex ritual. Years later, before entering American Gothic into the museum's competition, Grant had looked down at the finished canvas cradled in his arms and grinned. His dark magic had succeeded perfectly. His grandparents were now trapped as the grim farmer and his sour daughter. After mocking them with a speech about how wrong they had been about his life, he whispered a final curse to the canvas. "You believed yourselves to be the most perfect, beautiful couple in America, didn't you? Well, your beauty will now be preserved forever for the public to mock. Just remember, tough tomatoes, you won't be getting your usual luxuries here. Enjoy eternity." After the Art Institute of Chicago purchased the piece, Grant would occasionally visit the exhibition hall just to taunt them. Standing before the canvas, as the painted figures wept silent, unnoticed tears, he would softly whisper, "I told you, nobody can hear you." Decades bled into history. Visitors changed. Exhibits rotated. Staff came and went. But the crushing reality of the canvas never changed. Overwhelmed by the profound isolation of their painted prison, the couple wept in cycles of endless depression. Now, in the year 2026, they watched as a curator wheeled the young man toward the exit. The boy was chatting animatedly with his friend about his upcoming medical courses at the UC Berkeley, casually mentioning how American Gothic was infinitely more striking than the overrated Mona Lisa. Hearing the vibrant life in his voice, fresh tears welled in the eyes of the farmer's daughter and tracked slowly down the paint. Decades of absolute confinement had given the grandmother an eternity to reflect. The cruel words she had spoken to her son so long ago constantly echoed in her thoughts. A deep, agonizing regret consumed her, and not a single day passed where she didn't desperately wish to take back the hurt she had inflicted on her family. If a chance at redemption were ever offered, she would seize it instantly. Yet, while she deeply regretted fracturing her family, she remained fiercely unyielding about the broader beliefs that had governed her life. She still rationalized her past, convincing herself that their historical involvement in the slave trade had been a bitter economic necessity, the only option available to keep the food on their table. Beside her, her husband had long since given up the fight. He had accepted their damnation. He felt no grand spiritual regret for his life, believing what was done, though he occasionally wished he hadn't beaten the young newsboy so savagely, if only because it might have altered their cosmic fate. His tears had dried up decades ago. His silent pleas had stopped when the absolute certainty of their permanent entrapment finally settled over his soul. In a strange way, his total surrender had brought him numbing peace that his wife completely lacked. The grandmother refused to follow him into the hopelessness. She kept the internal fire of a defiance burning, maintaining an impenetrable mental defense against despair. Though they could not speak to one another, the absence of his tears told her everything she needed to know about his resignation. Her own near silent screams for help never stopped. She desperately hoped that someone, someday, might finally hear her. The binding magic had stripped away her ability to move her mouth, but a small flaw in the curse allowed her to produce a faint, gurgling vibration deep within her throat. It was a pathetic, microscopic sound, but it was all she had left to keep her hopes alive. But as the heavy gallery doors clicked shut, leaving the room in darkness, the departure of the last visitors served as a brutal reminder. Nobody had heard her. Just like yesterday, just like everyone else before. Hope and near silent pleas were all she had, and still nothing changed. Maybe liberation would come tomorrow, maybe next week, maybe in a decade, maybe a century, maybe never. All right, that's it for tonight's story. Oh my god, this is so hard. Let me know in the comments how you liked it, and I'm gonna catch you next time. Peace.